I always sit wrong for these, I notice. This year, the Blue Devils are presenting a program entitled The Romantics. For this year's show, we are exploring elements of the artistic movement known as Romanticism. A lot of change occurred during this time as a reaction to industrialism and neoclassical customs and mores and morals. And the Romantics decided to explore different avenues of thought and feeling and creativity. This year's program actually started with a look at what are called cabinets of curiosities. Prior to having museums, people often kept valued artifacts and things that they had accumulated from traveling in a space in the home, like a chamber or a room or a cupboard or a cabinet. And people would come and visit each other's homes to see these curiosities. And it could range from artistic items, valuable purchased items from around the world, to curiosities that were very odd or venturing on the grotesque, like skeletons and bones. But when I was thinking about cabinets of curiosities, as with any show, you want to know more than just what is it, you want to know what about it. And so then I began to think about who would be looking at these cabinets, and that led me to the Romantics and the period of Romanticism. And so we began to talk a lot more about elements of Romanticism to portray emotion and music and great melodrama. It was an interesting movement that was an important one for freeing up many people's thoughts in a number of ways, whether it was political or whether it was artistic. The Romantics were fiercely devoted to equality amongst all people. They were fiercely devoted to children being children and not being workers as they were during the industrial time. So there were a lot of areas that Romanticism sort of worked with the creative process and was a great vehicle to express emotion. But it all began with cabinets of curiosities and who would be looking at them. So you can see a nodding of the head to the cabinets of curiosities through our props that we're using this year. And various items come out of those cabinets and sort of entertain and help the Romantics to explore the program. There are several moments through Romanticism because, of course, we can't explore the entirety and the entire grandeur of what was the Romantic movement. But there are several moments that were influential, one being a very famous painting called The Wanderer in the Sea of Fog, I think, if I've got that right. Most people know it as The Wanderer. And you'll see a man standing in front of a vast landscape. And we allude to this because the individual and the reverence for nature was very, very important to the Romantics and also prompted deep, deep feelings and that sort of quest to find the sublime. You're talking, the Romanticism was basically mid-1700s to early 1800s. And you notice this in a lot of ways if you look at pictures from the early 1700s to the late 1700s. The Romantics began to shed things like wigs and tighter, restrictive clothing. There was a little more freedom and a looseness, and we elude that with Romanticism now. The looser shirt, the long hair, the ability of people to express their inner feelings freely, whereas prior to that, the Age of Enlightenment was really based in logic and reason. And the Romantics all said, well, how do I feel about it? Several elements of Romanticism plays itself out throughout the show. The individual for the Romantics was very important. So you'll see individuals taking their own path suddenly during the program. Since Romanticism was basically a rebellion against the Age of Reason, you'll see things that might look very logical, like a block, and then suddenly they turn into something else more freeing for the individual. You'll see references to nature and the expansiveness of nature, of climbing through a landscape, such as climbing on the props, and how those can evolve like mountain ranges throughout the program. You'll see childlike quality and playful quality, which was so imparted during the imagination section of the show, because being a child was very important, and not being just a worker in a factory. They wanted children to be children, and the imagination they thought was important for all ages. This year's costuming refers to the depth of what a person can experience emotionally. So I went a little darker, but there are hints of color that come forth through the core proper. We're using capes this season just because of the sense of drama that black velvet can have, and how it becomes a cloak that starts to open. It's open in the front, and then when they remove them, it's like revealing what's inside of you and freeing yourself up. The velvet of the capes also works like a curtain, and the color guard is costumed in an array of color and pattern that reference the era of Romanticism, and so thus revealing the individuality of those color guard performers against the backdrop of this vast emotional landscape. The show works in 5 parts, but we took elements of Romanticism, all beginning with the letter I, referring to the self, and also I, the ability to see something beyond what's just inside of us or on the outside. We're looking for something new and something outside of ourselves. The show begins with part 1, which is idealism and the individual. The idealism really refers to this moment where the Romantics said, here's what the norm is, here's what's normal, and we want to go beyond that. We want to break that. One of their ways to do that was through the individual. So the individual and that individual's feelings and motivation were going to become very important for part 1. When we get into part 2, imagination comes forth, and that's the Hisachi merry-go-round piece. Because again, the reference to children and the childlike qualities that even an adult can have when it comes to being creative and imagining. The Romantics invented our modern explanation for the word creativity. So it's very important to reference those moments of playfulness. In the middle of that section, though, is a reference to Frankenstein and a creature that everyone reacts to in their own emotional way, and then takes us back into this whirlwind of imagination. Part 3 of the program is called Introspection, and this is a portion that really references the cult of self that the Romantics had. The Romantics really were involved in finding their own inner feelings and how those could come forth in their opinions and emotions. How does one feel about it? To showcase this, we work in a lot of pair situations, like walking up to a mirror and seeing yourself and really looking deeply. Those references can even find themselves in form in the staging, whether it's a square to a square and how they reflect each other, and then how they can move together, or how one can morph into something else while reaching the other part. Beyond introspection, we start to look at inspiration, and inspiration can come from all kinds of places. With us in this program, it's energy. It's a lot of energy, and people inspiring people, individuals inspiring individuals. And this comes forth in how they work together on the field, how they're interacting with each other through speed, through time, through choreography. The ballad portion of the show is called Isolation. And this references the great emotions and feelings that one can have when you're in an isolated situation. We're using a wonderful musical piece by Billy Porter called Time. And there's nothing that you can become more aware of when you're isolated than time and how it's moving and how it's changing. So the ballad really references those emotions, and the great swells of emotion that can happen and how you can go deep inside of yourself to explore new parts and really think of yourself in a new way. We wrap up our adventure and our look into Romanticism looking with sections that are called Immersion and Incomprehensible. Immersion is really about something the Romantics were quite interested in, the look at other themes and other cultures and how those can come together to create a whole new knowledge base and a whole new group of feelings, because you were exploring the new and working in ways that you would hope were always original and exploring and finding new avenues to express yourself. When we get to the end of the show, it's the ultimate reference to The Wanderer and that famous painting, trying to create that landscape and that situation where you're just in awe of something and you are reaching the sublime moment. It's the goal, to stand in awe of something so great and so wonderful. And that's what nature could do for the Romantics, and that brings up maybe the most important feeling ever, is that feeling of awe and wonderment that one can have. And it helps you to get a view of who you are as a human being in that situation amongst the vastness and the grandeur of nature. There is an element of Romanticism that was called Gothic Romanticism. It was a darker look at the darker emotions, at those moments where we feel fear or horror or shock, or just even deeper feelings like depression or sadness or grief. So there was a Gothic movement, and there's some disagreement on how important the Gothic movement was as a concrete building block of Romanticism. There is some disagreement to that, but it was definitely a part, and Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is a good example of Gothic Romanticism. I really love the props. Darren Stack did an incredible job, and his partner Jeff. I love the capes and the way the capes look. And I love the enthusiasm that the performers have wearing them. It's really something to see.
It's got to be fun.
Yeah, it's really fun. And it's very dramatic, which is very much Romanticism.
Right.
Very much big feelings are happening in this show. And that's really great. Performances and emotions only work if they're genuine. And we're lucky to have the performers we have because they are extremely authentic. They don't fake anything. Helping young people be able to perform a show about something that was so far in the past, you have to be able to relate it to emotions, feelings, references that they have from today. It's another one of the reasons we like to use modern music to portray emotional content in our programs, because it's hard to recreate, and especially to find an exact recreation of something historical. And even musically, we wanted to find something that the performers could relate to from the here and now, but connect them to the things that were happening in the past. And it's not just events that were happening in the past, the psychology of individuals in the past, the emotions of those individuals in the past. So we have to find a way to connect the dots with performers from here and now to events that happened in the past. You can't necessarily go too deeply into methods and process of theatricality and acting in our particular situation, because our performances require spontaneity. So teaching performers to be open to what their body is telling them and to be open to the emotions that can happen in the moment, and then to also at the same time maintain control. That's the route we take in order to find a genuine, spontaneous, living thing that we call a program and a performance. Yeah, pacing is one of the most difficult things to tackle in any program. And pacing and how you feel about the pacing of a program can change from day to day, the same way as you can see a movie one day and feel one way about it and the next day feel a different way. Or you can watch a movie one day and you had to get up to do something, a minor chore in one place, but the next day you were so riveted you couldn't get up and move during that part. Pacing changes with our feelings and what we as individuals bring to the experience as a viewer. So our job with the Blue Devils is to find pacing that welcomes that constant change and welcomes anybody's ability to experience it differently on any day. Whether that's positive or negative, our job is to give the performers a vehicle, and the pacing lets that vehicle come to life. But here's the thing about any drum corps show and any color guard show too. They work at a very base level of what's right there, right before your very eyes. Is it energetic? Is it exciting? Is it accurate? It's when you begin to dig deeper that you see elements of the concept within the design of the program and within the performance of a program. My goal is always for you to see a program more than once. So it's nice for you to get sort of that surface energy that happens from a show. Like the notes were loud, the rifles caught solid, they were so accurate when they marched to that rotation. They were very passionate in their performance, very baseline reaction. I enjoy that, and then I also enjoy starting to dig deeper and seeing, oh, here's a reference to ... whether it's romanticism or any other concept. It's fun to see shows more than once. I couldn't think of the word, what's it called? When you're just feeling things like, you know, when an event happens and it's a visceral experience. You know what I mean? That's how you experience drum corps from a surface standpoint. It's visceral. It's loud, it's exciting, it's fast. And then when you start to look into it, you can get those other elements. But see, this year, it's just going to be like with the capes at the beginning of the program, like that's powerful. I think you would just say, this is powerful. And then you start to go, oh wait, they're in a character right now. Yeah, that's the fun part.